All right, guys, so we're here at the Northeast Trade Show 2024 here in Secaucus, New Jersey. Now, I'm sitting here with Brandon Louder. He's our VP of Sales for Accudraft. You guys sent in some questions. He's going to answer them for us today. Let's get right to it. All right, Brandon, so for this one, it's a three-part question. We're just going to start with the first one. How often should I change my floor filters?
A lot more often than you think you should. A good rule of thumb would be like 40 to 60 spray hours, not working hours, but spray hours. So that should get you, anywhere from a week to 2 weeks, you should be changing floor filters. Just kind of depends how busy you are, how much you're spraying, but.
Now, would that change at all if it's downdraft versus a cross draft?
Yeah, well, it can, because typically a downdraft has more square footage of exhaust media. A lot of semi-down or cross-draft booths have a smaller filter area, so those are going to load up quicker. So you might be looking at changing those, every 3 to 5 days, possibly.
Okay, just depending on, obviously, the amount that you're spraying through.
Correct, and if you use water-based or solvent-based. So keep in mind, when you're spraying water-based, your filters are going to clog up a little bit quicker.
They're going to load up a whole lot faster. That's one thing I noticed whenever I made the swap from solvent to water, is just how much more material loaded up in the filters themselves. So
absolutely.
Now the second part, he's wanting to know, how long does dirt trap last on walls? Now there's several different ways, several different products to put on walls, dirt trap, and then just regular booth coatings. But obviously he's asking about dirt trap. That's going to be a question just, again, based on how much that you're spraying. What have you seen? What do you think?
Well, I think it really depends on how clean the booth is when you put the dirt trap on. If you start with a brand new booth and put dirt trap on, we usually see it last anywhere from 3 to 6 months. But if the walls are a little bit dirty, it's not going to stick as well. We've seen guys maybe put some white tape on the seams as well to kind of help hold it up. But I'd say as a rule of thumb, you should plan on looking at replacing it. It should last 3 months. But sometime shortly after that, you might have to be replacing it.
Okay. So one thing I want to add on that, if you guys are putting coverings on your walls like dirt trap, one thing you want to do is like a shingle style, where you're starting at the bottom of the booth wall and working your way up. That way, each layer as it gets added is actually laying on top of, and you're not creating a area for dirt to sit in between those layers. That's one of the things he's mentioned is putting a layer of tape on. That's one way to get around it. But one less thing to do, just a tip to throw it out there.
One thing with dirt trap you might notice too is any of the seams in your booth, you might notice after it's been on there a little while that it looks dirty at the seams of your booth. If you've got a modern spray booth and you're running positive pressure, keep in mind that's not dirt coming in. That's actually catching dirt that's going out through that seam, because the booth is blowing up like a balloon. So you're pushing a little bit of air out of all the seams in the booth. So if they're not caulked properly, you're going to push a little air out that seam, you're going to see some tracking, and it looks like dirt where the seams of the booth are. Don't worry about that's not dirt coming in, that's dirt going out.
Very good point. All right, the last question for Andrew here is, how frequently should I change out my air hoses?
Air hoses, that's an interesting one. It depends on what you have for air hoses. I know there are certain brands of air hoses that are meant to be inside of a spray booth, because you don't take them out when you do a bake cycle, so they're going to go to 160 degrees multiple times a day. Really, I think a good rule of thumb would be looking at it every 6 months.
Yeah, and one of the things on that is also, whenever you're dealing with air hoses, he mentioned there's two different types. Obviously, some of the cheaper hoses, I've seen a lot of people will put the cheaper hoses in there just to get them by. Watch it whenever you're doing those, because of the fact if you're using a fresh air system, a lot of those hoses are not meant to be used for the breathing air supply line that's going to it. You'll want something that's got a copper core around it. It's an insulated hose. It's made to protect that lining inside from any of the isocyanates or chemicals basically wicking through the hose. So just add that to it. Breathing line, I would do the same thing every 6 to 8 months, something like that, just to play it safe. I'm a fresh air guy. Highly suggest it.